All right, good evening, everyone. We are the group two, and for tonight, we will present to you a case study entitled The Evolution of Filipino Identity Through Historical Periods. Next slide, please. All right, this case study examines the evolution of Filipino identity, exploring how historical events and cultural exchanges have shaped it from the pre-colonial era to the present. By analyzing key influences, including colonial legacies, religious transformations, social systems, and the impacts of wars and global connectivity, this study seeks to uncover how Filipinos have continually adapted and fused diverse elements into a unique national identity. Through a combination of historical texts, media analysis, and expert insights, the study will highlight recurring themes such as resilience, adaptability, and the complex blend of Eastern and Western influences that characterize modern Filipino identity. Now, for the objective of this study, the primary goal of this case study is to explore how historical events have shaped Filipino identity. It will focus on its evolution from pre-colonial practices to the modern post-independence era. It delves into the significant cultural, religious, and social influences introduced during different periods, such as the indigenous traditions of early Filipinos, the Spanish colonization that brought Catholicism, and also European governance, and the American influence on education and democracy. Additionally, the study examines how colonial legacies, wars, and increasing global connectivity have left lasting impacts on Filipino values and traditions. While this exploration underscores how these historical forces have combined to form a unique national identity of the Filipinos, characterized by their resilience, adaptability, and a blend of the Western and Eastern elements, making us today, the modern Filipino, our identity, a dynamic and evolving construct. Next slide, please. Now, under the methodology section, we will tackle the data collection and approach being used in this case study. Next slide, please. For the data collection, our methodology integrates diverse sources to capture the complex evolution of Filipino identity. The data collection involved a comprehensive review of historical texts and scholarly articles that detail the Philippine history and cultural studies, providing foundational context. We also analyzed media representations, including films and documentaries like the most popular General Luna and Goyo, the Batang General, which offer visual and narrative insights into the pivotal historical moments. Additionally, we conducted also interviews with historians and cultural experts to gain a nuanced perspectives on how specific events and eras have shaped Filipino values and identity. Now, for our approach, next slide, please. This study uses the approach of this study combines a comparative analysis and thematic analysis in order to gain a deeper understanding of Filipino identity. Through comparative analysis, we examine various historical periods such as the pre-colonial, Spanish, American, and post-independence eras. And also, by these, we assess their distinct contributions to the formation of Filipino identity, highlighting how each period shaped cultural, social, and political values. Meanwhile, for the second approach, we use the thematic analysis, which focuses on identifying the recurring themes across these periods, such as resilience, adaptability, and cultural fusion, which have remained central to the Filipino experience. This dual approach allows us to trace how these key traits have evolved and interwoven over time, shaping a unique national identity that blends diverse influences amongst all those colonizers while maintaining our core values. Now, to introduce you with the key historical periods that shaped our Filipino identity, I will give you to Mr. Delfin Cañete, Devon.
Thank you so much, Meca. Next slide, please. So now let's go to the historical periods that helped shape the Filipino identity today. So first, we have the pre-colonial era. It was before 1521. And next, we have the Spanish colonial period, the beginning from 1565 until 1898. And next, we have Japanese colonial period, start from 1942 until 1945. And we have American colonial period from 1898 to 1946. And last, we have the post-independence era from 1946 until today. Next slide, please. So let's talk about first the pre-colonial era. So during this time, the social structure was organized around barangays led by datus with classes like Muharlika or the warriors, Timawa or the freeman, and Alipin or the servants. Their cultural practices was rich oral traditions, animism, and ancestor worship. So their influence on modern identity was the community cooperation or the bayanihan, strong oral traditions and cultural diversity. So we all know the bayanihan. So helping one another. Next. Next era or period, we have the Spanish colonial period. So the religion during this period, they introduced the Catholicism, which is the dominant religion today in our present days. And their social hierarchy, encomienda system, and rise of the ilustrado class or educated Filipinos. So their cultural syncretism was blend of indigenous and Spanish customs, evident in festivals, food, and architecture. So their enduring influence was Catholic traditions, Spanish loanwords in language, and fiestas remained central to Filipino culture. As we all know that we have still some words, borrow words from the Spanish. Next slide, please. So next we have the Japanese colonial period. So their cultural resistance, despite efforts to promote Japanese values, Filipinos preserved their own customs and language as a form of defiance. So in this period, Filipino tried to fight for their freedom and seek for a peaceful reform. So we have a guerrilla warfare, rise of resistance groups like Hukbalahap, fostering a spirit of patriotism, and their community solidarity shortages fostered the Bayanihan spirit, reinforcing community ties. So the Bayanihan spirit is still in this period. And the legacy today that the Japanese left was resilience, community cooperation, and a strong national pride in Filipino identity. And next slide, please. And now I will give you to Miss Angel Ybañez to continue the discussion.
Okay, to continue, American colonial period. Under the American colonial period, this education system, this was introduced the English language and American education standards, leading to widespread literacy. In the political ideals, its introduction of democracy, including legislative assembly and civic participation, and also the cultural exchange, American sports, media, and lifestyle took root in Filipino society. Modern influence, we have the English proficiency, democratic ideals, and the popularity of American culture remain significant in Filipino life. Next, please. The last but not the least, we have here the post-independence era. In the post-independence era, we have the nation building, efforts to create a unified identity amidst regional diversity, and the economic transformation, shift from an agrarian to an industrial and service-oriented economy with major contribution for overseas Filipino workers or the OFWs. And also we have the political landscape, periods of democratic governance and authoritarian rule shape political awareness and advocacy. And next, please. We have also here the globalization. In this era, we have increased exposure to international cultures through migration, technology, and trade. And last, we have the current identity, embraces both heritage and modern influences, demonstrating resilience and adaptability. And next, so I will give you to Analeona to continue what is the comparative analysis of influences.
All right, so let's quickly review the major influences that shape Filipino identity. So we do have the religion and beliefs. The Filipino spirituality evolved from indigenous animism and ancestor worship to Catholicism with Spanish colonization. This blending of old and new beliefs still shape Filipino religious practices today. And also we have the political ideals. Filipino political systems evolved from indigenous leadership to the Spanish colonial social hierarchy, then to American-inspired democracy after independence. These influences continue to impact the country's governance. Now we have the education and the language. Before colonization, Filipino used the Baybayin script. The Spanish introduced Spanish, and later on, the Americans made English a primary language. Today, the Philippines is a bilingual society, blending local and global languages. And the next slide would be our findings. So let's highlight the key traits that define the Filipino identity. Now we have the resilience. Filipinos have shown incredible resilience through centuries of colonization, natural disasters, and political challenges. This strength is a cornerstone of Filipino identity. And now we have the bayanihan, or community spirit. Filipinos value bayanihan, the spirit of helping one another, especially during crisis. This sense of community is a core aspect of everyday Filipino life. And now we have the third, which is cultural syncretism. Filipino culture blends indigenous traditions, Spanish influence, American ideals, and modern global trends, creating a unique and evolving cultural identity. And now lastly, we have pride and heritage. Despite challenges, Filipinos take pride in their heritage, honoring both their history and their achievements in the modern world. And lastly, we do have the next slide. Conclusions. To conclude, Filipino identity is a dynamic fusion of historical influences, shaped by resilience, adaptability, and a mix of Eastern and Western elements. It has evolved through centuries of foreign influence, but remains deeply rooted in tradition. The Filipino spirit of unity and pride in heritage continues to thrive, making Filipino identity both enduring and relevant today. So next slide. And that would be all. Thank you so much.